So, the same, the Rebbe says, just as that seed in the ground, if you, for example, would tamper with it, or you may experiment, graft it, you can actually change the produce. The same is with the spiritual energies, that someone who is able to understand, who's able to maneuver, manipulate the inner workings behind the scenes and change those spiritual energies, then it will have an inevitable impact on the physical reality. And then the Rebbe concluded, when the students had asked him, can you perform a miracle? He says, so if I influence you tonight, to do a good deed, we will have performed a miracle. So that's just an understanding of the dynamics of how spirituality impacts the physical world. But here the theme of this week's portion is the issue, what about somebody who has access to the spiritual realities and knows how to maneuver and manipulate them, but does so for dark reasons, for selfish reasons? And here lies the power of what we'll call distorted spiritual energy. For example, if a person does it for self-interest or for money, like in this proportion, Balaam was ready for hire to be paid by Bullock to curse the Jews. And ultimately it didn't work out, but he was ready to do so. And this is where God gives free will, that a person may have that type of emotional sensitivity, spiritual sensitivity. You see this, for instance, let's say you go to a therapist. You go to someone who you open your heart to. And let us say they're gifted. They're able to really enter into your soul, into your psyche. They can empathize. They can connect to you on that level. This person has power. He has power to access and touch your soul. If you were in the street or in business or at work, you may have your guard up, and your defenses up, and you wouldn't be vulnerable. But there are situations where we're vulnerable, and that's why when we call something abuse, the worst types of abuse is when the person who's doing the abusing is someone who's able to go inside of you, a parent, a father, a mother, a therapist, a trusted teacher. Those are the worst types of abuse, because you've opened yourself up to, you expect love from them, and many times they do love you, but at the same time, that vulnerability, they in a sense are playing with your spiritual energies, and in effect can cause serious damage on the physical level. This is why in the Torah, what we call sexual abuse, Gilui Arayas. What does Gilui Arayas mean? Gilui Arayas means the revealing of the hidden, of that which is covered. That in this material world, because of its greed, its corruption, God created the world where the spiritual energies are concealed and covered up, protected by a shell. Sometimes, when we're very vulnerable, we have the hardest shell of all. Look at the porcupine. The porcupine, they say, has the softest underbelly. But because it's so soft, because it's so fragile, so sensitive, it needs those needles to protect itself. And the same you'll find, we know where pearls come from. What is a pearl? A natural pearl. It is an oyster protecting its soft skin from infection, from dust, from a particle that may enter. For example, a piece of dust on your eye is very, very irritating. An oyster has very, very, in its inner skin, beneath the shell, it has a very soft flesh. And when a piece of dust gathers there, the oyster will secrete a liquid that when that hardens becomes a pearl. It's a way of protecting itself. So what we call pearls of wisdom, pearls around our neck, pearls in the soup, these pearls that we call precious are actually an oyster just protecting itself from dust. So you'll find the same as psychologically. When we're sensitive, we need to have protection. For instance, when you're, God forbid, in surgery, because the internal organs are being opened, and bacteria, of course, can attack infection, the room must be sterilized. When we walk in the street, our outer layers of skin, our hair, protects us from any infections. it filters everything out. But when the inner organs are open, when you're vulnerable, that's when you need that protection. So essentially, that concept of spiritual energy affecting the physical world has one caveat, and that is that there is a filter that it has to go through. Those people who are able to enter the spiritual have to be extremely careful, extremely humble, extremely selfless in their effort, or else they will ultimately hurt us. And this is what we call spiritual abuse. Black magic. Any form of manipulation of the spiritual that has ulterior motives, that has not the human welfare in mind, that is not divine, has the ability to be extremely destructive. So the concept of ayin hara, for instance. An ayin hara, we talk about an evil eye. What is an evil eye? An evil eye, we say, is somebody who casts an evil eye on us. This could be in the most extreme level where you hear where there's a concept of actual demonic force that affects you. Or, as people see you blessed, and they say, and they don't fagin, so to speak. They are what's the word for fagin? They cannot stand that another person has something good. So there are people who are afraid of ayin haras. We say, bli ayin hara. How many children do you have? How many grandchildren? Bli ayin hara. Because when there's a blessing, you don't want the other side to come and challenge it, and the other side to say, you deserve it. This person deserves it. Look who they are. And people are afraid of this ayin hara. What does the Torah say about an ayin hara? The concept exists. We have the expression ayin hara. Yet there's an interesting statement from the rabbis and from the mystics that an ayin hara affects only those that believe in it. What does that mean? That if you believe in it, you're giving it power? Yes, because another person cannot ultimately control your destiny. If you allow yourself, if you're vulnerable, and another person, and you allow someone in, it's like letting a thief into your inner sanctum. So yes, that person can affect you. But if a person has resolve, faith, strength, there are no forces, there are no stars that can affect you. And that's the concept of mazel. We say mazel tov. We say that that on, for example, the month of Adar is a mazel of simcha, of joy, and there are other months that are negative mazel. For instance, the month of Av, which we're coming up to, when there's Tisha B'Av, the saddest day on the calendar. But then we say ein mazel Yisrael. Israel does not have mazel; they're above mazel. What does that mean? It means that we have predispositions. There are times in the year where a certain spiritual energy is flowing, and it's predisposed, so to speak, leans toward. There's I keep losing my words. Predisposed a tendency, or it's conducive to, but it doesn't control your destiny. Now, if you're let go, and you say, "Listen, I just surrender to the moments," then you're allowing those forces to affect you. So yes, we go through life, spiritual energies do fluctuate and change, but we have the ability to control our destiny. The Hasidic masters actually say, ein mazel Yisrael, which literally means there is no mazel to the Jews, to Israel. They say, ayin is also to be read ayin mazel. The mazel of a Jew is ayin, is the level of bittul. Ayin means nothingness. So there is a mazel, but it's beyond mazel. It's because when you have that bittul connection to God, you are able to control your destiny. And that's what we say, trach gut wird sein gut. Think good and it will be good. Or we have the concept of prayer. A person, God forbid, is lying in a hospital, very ill. So you could say, how could you pray? God destined. The spiritual destiny, the spiritual energies dictate that this person has to be sick. Yet we pray, and we say, please God, change your will, change the destiny. Because even though the spiritual energies may be a certain type, we can reach deeper, ayin, to the bittul level, to a higher level, and we can actually manipulate it for the good. So, what we're saying here is the following. Spirituality affects the material world. In the purest and healthiest sense, you have people who have the ability to access that spiritual world, a Rebbe, a Tzaddik, a Prophet, a Moses. and in turn help us grow, help us succeed in the physical plane. All fine and good. But there are also forces, we'll call forces from the other side, satanic forces, demonic forces, what we call Sitra Achra, the other side, that also have the ability to enter into the spiritual, and they're contaminated. In the psychological sense, it's a form of abuse. They abuse you through accessing or through touching your most sensitive place, your spiritual place, your sexual place, your intimate place. And that in turn has very deep impact on the outer level of our lives. And that's essentially what black magic is. That's what Billam was attempting to do. He knew that he needed God's permission. Now, are we victim when someone has that power? The answer is no, we're not. They may have that power, but you have the power to not let it in, which requires you to have a connection. Remember, the whole power of someone accessing the spiritual is not because they're powerful. They're accessing the divine. However, they're filtering it or distorting it in a way that is contaminating. Think of it as someone who has a lot of power, but instead of using it for constructive purposes, they use it for destructive purposes. God has given us that free will. But you have the ability to reach above the source. Where are they getting their spiritual energy from? Ain Mazel Yisrael. They're getting it from a level, and you're going ayin to another level that's higher than that, which in a sense counters or repels or immunizes you from them contaminating you. In the case of this week's chapter, Balaam, it was God that protected the Jews. Now, obviously, it was connected to the Jewish faith, the faith of the Jews, but it was God who said to Balaam, no, you will say what I tell you to say. And Balaam knew that. So even though he opened his mouth, and from his mouth he wanted to convey and to communicate curses, blessings came out. Because it was God that put in that energy, using that spiritual energy, using him as a conduit to be constructive, to help, to bless, to bring out some of the most beautiful features, some of these blessings that become the foundation of what the Jewish people are about. Balaam, in a strange way, his blessings not only did not hurt the Jews, it ended up blessing them and giving them power against the enemies of the Jews. So Balaam ends up being an ally. A liability becomes an ally. An interesting thing in this week's chapter as well is the only time in the Torah, or the first time in the Torah, where the word Satan is used. Satan comes from this chapter, when that Balaam was walking in this path. So an angel got in the way, the Satna, and it confused or it distracted or it blocked the way. The Satna is a form of confusion, a form of distraction. But here it's used, interestingly, against Balaam. Usually we would say satanic forces, demonic forces, that would be Balaam. But here the Torah is using Satan against him, an angel that is not letting him proceed to do what he wanted to do his satanic act. So it's similar to the idea, you see that the word Satan, even though it has such negative implications, can also be used in the positive. The Satan can confuse the confuser, so to speak. And this goes back to the theme I discussed last week, where the negative forces in life, the serpent, can be transformed into the positive by recognizing that the purpose of the serpent, why was the serpent sent in the first place, was not because he has power, but because God wanted to test us, wanted to test our mettle, to see what we're capable of. If you recall, the discussion was that the Yetzer Hara is given power by God to challenge the human being. But the Talmud says, Satan u'Pnina l'shem shamayim niskavnu. The Satan and Pnina, the prostitutes in the Torah, their intention was l'shem shamayim, for God's sake. God appoints the Satan and says, I'm giving you, just like there are good angels, I'm giving you the mission. Go and challenge a human being. Remember, how is it possible that a divine soul, a powerful divine soul, has the ability to fall? How could a Yetzer Hara, a lowly, selfish, evil inclination, be more powerful than the divine within us, than the good within us? Because it also has divine power. The divine power to challenge us. That's its intention. Not, God forbid, that we should give in. Its intention is to challenge us. So the Satan L'Shem Shemayim is also, the Satan doesn't like the job, says, I don't want to do this job. God says, this is my mission to you. You must do it and do it faithfully. And I'm giving you power to do it. So the Satan itself, the Satan, really says, I don't really want to, when he challenges us, when our evil inclination challenges inside, in their inner will, they say, please don't listen to me. But you don't hear that voice. You only hear the voice of temptation. So when we look at a negative experience, the serpent or any other experience of that nature, on the surface it may look like our enemy. If you look within, it may be your ally. It's a voice that's helping you become a better person, but it has to come through an obstacle. Resistance makes us stronger. You see this in technology and science, that resistance creates a deeper surge. And that is essentially what the Satan was. So in here, Balaam had the power of spiritual energy. He wanted to use it in a cursed way, God forbid. As on history, you'll find people who have that access. Even today, you find people who have that ability to emotionally manipulate us. However, this is all if we allow them in. But additionally, there's another point here, that the essence of a person's, of the Satan's power is also a positive power. And that's what the verse is saying, that God blocked the way, the Satna, the angel of God blocked the way, was blocking the blocker. And the way you see here is how it's hinted that Satan really, the first time Satan is used in the Torah, is in a positive way. Not to allow Balaam's satanic negative forces, but a Satan that reveals his true intention. Its true intention is to bring blessings to this world. So just to add one point that I wanted to mention last week in discussing the serpent, there's a very interesting point that Nachash, as we spoke then, the Torah uses the expression Saraf, which means the burned one. And we discussed that Saraf comes from the angel of the that's called Seraphim, that the root of the serpent below comes from a high level of angelic and spiritual force. But it says also that Nachash and Saraf rather, which means to burn, is also the same gematria, the same number as the word Ashir, the wealthy one, a rich person. So it says from the Kadesh Elyon, which is an expression from the holy sages, we're told that after a fire a person becomes wealthy. And the way the Kabbalists put it is because Chesed is love, followed by Gvura, which is severity, fire, and severity is always followed by Tiferes, compassion, wealth. The fact that Nachash, Saraf, the burned, is the same gematria as well tells you that on an external level it looks like it's a burned situation. A burned house, God forbid, a burned business. Someone gets burned is not considered a positive thing, and no one we'd ever want to have that. But within it lies redemption as well, healing as well. As we discussed, the same serpent that killed, that poisoned, became the same serpent that gave life. Now, of course, it's not the serpent, as we discussed then, it's the divine forces that work through the serpent. So interestingly, in the following chapter, the theme is amplified. Balaam is the serpent now, who is an agent of God, has the free will and the ability to use his spiritual power to hurt, to curse, for selfish reasons, for inappropriate ones, to defile, to desecrate that power. But here, God says, no, I will not let you use it. And the deeper meaning of the Satan is revealed, that it ends up being blessings, revealed blessings. So in our own personal lives, what this means is that we have many challenges. Are there ayin haras, are there evil energies around us? Does a red thread going to ward off those evil energies? These are very good questions. And the answer to all of them is, yes, there is the concept of negative spiritual energy. There is the concept of people who can put a cast in evil eye, some people who just have that not forgiven element. They're not like when another person is benefited. They cannot tolerate when another person is happy. For no reason, they just have that negative, they look at everything with a negative eye. Either it's because they feel that they were not blessed, and why does someone else deserve more than they? or whatever reason it is. But their power is only as strong as you allow them in. So in life, we're going to meet such people. First thing is, you have to get out of the line of fire. If such so-called friends are yours that are able to do that to you, you have to get away from that and not allow them to affect you. Secondly, faith. Connect to God. Remember, all forces, all spirituality comes from one source. And if you connect it, then you become less vulnerable and less prone to illness, to spiritual illness that others can affect you. You see this all the time. When are we most vulnerable? When we're not strong, when we're not connected to something that we really are passionate, when we're bored, when we're empty. And that usually leads us to a situation where we can be hurt. But when a person immunizes themselves with faith, with optimism, with friends that are upbeat, this isn't just a nice concept. You actually, those friends that are upbeat and give you optimism and have a vote and have confidence in you, are feeding you with energy. It's positive energy that becomes a counterbalance to that negative. But if you don't have that, if you're depressed and you have depressed friends, and wherever you go, there's that type of always, the type of collective misery loves company, and we're all miserable type of thing. What do you think happens? What you're doing is feeding yourself with a negative energy. You're weakening your resolve. You're weakening and not allowing your positive soul to express itself. So of course you're going to be vulnerable to an ayin hara. Who do you think predators attack? Who do predators attack? Predators attack first those that are weakest. They're not going to go for the strong ones. They'll go for those that are at the edge of society. They won't go to those that that have the strength and the ability to protect themselves. So it's all really up to us. Obviously, people, that's from our end. From the predator's end, the predator has power. And that spiritual power is the ability to curse, the ability to hurt. So there's two different sides to it. And analyzing the whole concept of dark energy, we have to realize that there's the side of the person who's so-called wields that energy, and there's the side of the person who's receiving that energy. And that is in our control. We have the ability to not allow it in, though there is such power. Now listen to the end of the story in this chapter. What happens? After Balaam blesses the Jews with such beautiful blessings, what happens next? What happens next is that before he leaves Bullock, he gives him a piece of advice. He says to him, send your beautiful Moabite maidens, the maidens of Moab, that was the country called Moab, send them to the Jews, let them seduce the Jews, and then you will have your revenge, then you will have your curse. And that's what happens. The Moabite women come, as the end of the chapter concludes tragically. Zimri, a leader among the Jewish people, openly and in defiance of God, in defiance of Moses, in defiance of the sanctity of his position, openly behaves in a very grotesque and promiscuous sexual way. And it's Pinchas, with his zealot, the gentle Pinchas, becomes a zealot to transform that, which is not the theme here. Next week's chapter is called Pinchas. But what really is going on here? Balaam is saying to Bullock, God is on their side. If you expect me to manipulate spiritual energies to change their physical reality for the negative through curses, that's not going to happen. Blessings have come out of my mouth, not curses. You've only made them stronger. You want to get to them? Hit them in their vulnerable spot. Allow them to destroy themselves. You are not going to destroy them. Because the Jews were immunized, they were protected from these curses. But remember, free will. Just like the one that the predator has free will, just like the prophet Balaam has free will, so too does the recipient have free will. And because the Jews have free will, this is where God does not protect us from, when we become our own worst enemy. So here the women came of Moab, and they seduced and tempted the men. And the men fell. So interestingly, it wasn't a spiritual curse that did it. It was a piece of practical advice. Seduce them, tempt them. This too was a way of using spiritual energy against the people in the sexual arena. But it wasn't done through Balaam's power of prophecy, his spiritual power. It was his common sense. He says, let them undo themselves. As long as they are strong, as long as they are together, as long as they are with God, God will protect them. But if they leave God, that's when they open themselves up to being attacked. And that's exactly what happened. The lessons are tremendous. We all have this in our lives. We are ultimately our own worst enemy. Yes, there are challenges that that people will have in life. Some of them are formidable challenges. I've seen some of the worst. I recently met with someone, and I was very moved by a thing he told me. He was telling me how he works actively every day to get rid of anger in his life. And he does the same with his children. He says, anger is a consuming fire that destroys you from within and eats you up. He says, this doesn't mean you're not entitled to disagree with someone. Some people you adamantly disagree with. You're ready to fight with them. But never allow it to become your anger. Because then it's eating you up. Anger is not about the other person, it's about you. You're destroying yourself through anger. Look at people who are angry. So we have discretion. You can absolutely disagree with someone. You may say you did something very inappropriate, but you still sleep at peace. Because their behavior does not impact and eat you up alive. Those of us that get eaten up by it, it's not just that person. It means you in your own spirit have something that is very vulnerable, maybe insecure, and they're feeding that fire that was in you, the fire of rage. So I said to him, this individual, I said, usually that type of strength to be able to fight anger, to recognize that it's not the other person that makes you angry, it's you that make yourself angry, and the other person is just a catalyst, comes usually that type of strength from our parents, and both in a healthy way and in an unhealthy way. What do I mean? In a healthy way, when we see our parents not get angry at things, even if they have opinions that are different than others, we learn to cope the same fashion. When we see parents who are constantly getting angry, and you hear them talking at the table, this neighbor is no good and that person is no good, their homes, unfortunately, you grow up with this negative energy. You hear constantly from family members, from parents, everything negative about everybody, constantly bad mouthing. Then you grow up in a home like that, you also become that way, always looking for faults, always being angry, having that type of angry look at things. So this gentleman says to me, interestingly that you say that. In my case, my mother, when I was 10 years old, left my father, which of course would be a very good reason to be angry, especially if his father was angry. Listen to this. His father, every day of his lifetime, he lived with his father. His mother left them. Every day his father would say how wonderful a woman his mother was, how she loves him, how she's a beautiful person, and so on. He was an only son. As he got older, he therefore reached his mother, and they had a relationship by phone in other ways, and he thought she was the most wonderful woman. That's what his father told him. As he grew older, his parents passed away separately. He found letters, because as I said, he was the only son, so he has their correspondence. And then while his father was telling him all the accolades and compliments about his mother, practically every day he would also write a letter to his mother, cursing her out, saying, how could you have left me and your son, especially your son? He needs you. I mean, the letters are respectful, but very angry, very upset. And he realizes that his father manipulated him by telling him how great his mother was. He never let him on to feel that way. But it's not manipulation. It's an admirable thing. How many people do that? People go through divorce. They always are blaming the other, and they want their children to be on their side, so to speak. For some reason, when you're insecure, obviously, you want everyone to be on your side. You're not so secure in your position, you need everyone to vote for you. Here you had a unique man who taught his son love. And though he had many reasons to be angry, it never was passed on to his child. Inside his heart he may have had it, but bottom line is his son learned not to be an angry person. Here's how a father transformed the liability, the divorce, or the separation, the abandonment, the betrayal of a mother or wife leaving her husband and her son. So we are in control of how we react. If you grew up in a home, unfortunately, where there was a lot of anger, a lack of control, you're going to have to work on it. It doesn't come easy. You're going to have to actively work every day to get rid of these toxins called anger. You have to learn that you can not agree with something, you may be upset about something, but it just should not consume you, or else that person is controlling your life. So to go back to our theme here, so Balaam wisely understood, sadly and tragically, that the people here were not going to be destroyed by his manipulation of spiritual energy. They're going to be destroyed by their own temptations, their own moments of weakness, and that's when the predator attacks. What does this mean in our own lives? We can bring upon ourselves an ayin hara. That's the truth. It's not others that do so. So when you hear someone say, people come to me, I think I have an ayin hara. Why? Because I've been dating guys, again, and nothing works out. Everything about to work out never works out. And of course you always say, did you look at yourself? Of course I looked at myself. I've analyzed, I've gone to therapy, and I'm doing everything right. Hardly. You don't always want to say it to somebody, because I see situations that are very sad. People have tried hard. And I'm not even suggesting it's malicious. Sometimes they try hard, they really think they're trying hard. But they're trying hard with very little tools. Imagine you're given the job to dig a pit, to dig a well. And you work all your life digging. And you show your fingernails, how you dug and dug and dug, and you barely got anywhere. You exerted yourself. But you have to look at one more thing. What were your tools? If you had no shovel, you had no pick, and you had no other tools to help you dig, so the same energy, imagine with tools where you would have gotten. So sometimes when people say, I've done everything, they may be right, but they've done everything with their limited tools. And sometimes you have to look, why do you have limited tools? How can I find better tools? And one of the tools that broadens our ability, what is a shovel after all? Something outside of you. With your hands you can only dig that much. With a shovel, its shape, its form, its force, it has the ability to with the same energy that you apply through using your hands, you now have amplified it many times over. The same is with every instrument, with every tool, with technology. I sit and speak here to you using a webcam, using technology. It's the same amount of exertion goes into it, but the technology amplifies it to reach many more people, transcend space and time, and so on. So often, a person may feel they've tried, but they need tools. What are the tools? You may need new advice. You may need an objective perspective. There are many ways that we can develop our tools. Sometimes you may need, maybe you haven't tried everything. I'm saying that even if you dug and tried everything, there's still ability to go further if you develop or acquire new tools, new friends, a new place. Mishana Mokim, Mishana Mazel. You change your place, you also change your mazel. Mazel, the word is used. You have the power to change your place. And by changing your place, the mazel changes. Not the mazel changes your place. Because if mazel controls us, then we shouldn't say Mishana Mokim, Mishana Mazel. You can say where you go, the mazel will follow you. No. When you change your space, you can change your mazel. New energies will flow in. You have the ability to do that. And we could also be our own worst enemy. Stay. What's the opposite of Mishana Mokim, Mishana Mazel? To stay in your Mokim, to stay in your space. So you have the option to change that space, and then your mazel shifts, and the energies of your mazel. Mazel really means Neizlim min halavonon. It's a form of energy being channeled into your life. Or you stay stagnant, you stay immobile, locked in your space. Not Mishana Mokim, but staying locked in your place, and then the mazel also will not change. Now space here, of course, literally means physical space. You live in one city, you move to another. But space, of course, means also psychological space. Your state of mind, your attitudes. So if you have them in one way, and you can be stuck in an attitude, it's patterns, it's habits. Sometimes when we continuously fail at something, we get into a rut. That's a habit. How do you get out of that space? How do you find new tools? usually begins with different people who will open up a new opportunity. It's like if you're trying to succeed in a particular area and you keep speaking to the same type of people, go speak to different type of people. Maybe they're not the experts. Maybe they're too close to you. Maybe they're not the right people. This is in our control. And of course the converse is also true. That if you don't do that, you become vulnerable. And we can become our own worst enemy. So the ayin hara, there are many energies out there. Look, you walk in the streets, there's bacteria everywhere. There are infections everywhere. There are toxins everywhere. Some people are affected by it, and some are not. Those with a strong immunity system are not affected. Those with a weak immunity system are affected. What does that tell you? That tells you that it's not that there aren't negative energies everywhere. Satanic energies, black energies, dark energies, Balaam's all over looking. It's that simply these forces don't control you if you have that immunity system. Now, are there times where it takes over? Yes, Hitler was a Satan, was a satanic demonic force that broke through, convinced 100 million Germans to go along with him in his murderous acts of destruction and genocide in the worst possible way. And when you see him speak, you can see the demonic force going through him. You see the hypnotic power he had over people. Here's a man who clearly had spiritual energy, but the darkest type. Stalin was another. People of great power. Great power always comes from a great strength. This doesn't mean it's a great strength in the positive way. Remember, great power can be the most destructive strength. It's the ultimate Billam. Why God did not stop Hitler like he stopped Balaam? Only God knows. And I'm not suggesting that then, in a case like there, had we done something differently, it wouldn't have happened. You know, sometimes a dark force does enter into this universe. In the case of Balaam, yes, at the end of the story, it was the Jews themselves that undid themselves by allowing to become weak, being seduced, tempted, etc. But there are dark forces in history that have taken over and have changed the world, unfortunately in the worst way. But after the Holocaust, we have the power. During, it's possible we could not have done anything. That's another discussion. Years earlier, had the world woken up, had it to Hitler and had they stood up to him, would it have happened? Was it appeasement, etc., etc.? But after the fact, what the Holocaust did to people could have destroyed them. This darkness could have consumed the world, or the pain remains, the loss remains, and you see Jews who rebuild their lives. We have a renaissance of Jewish life today. So they took these energies, the resistance, and built up strength from it. This doesn't justify and doesn't explain that satanic, demonic force. But it does explain that we have the ability, we do have choice. And the choice is ultimately what we do with these challenges. Do we allow it to destroy us? Do we allow it to make us stronger? So, the discussion of black magic, the discussion of negative spiritual forces, is a very fascinating one. You know, I've heard from friends of mine, come from South Africa and other African countries, they say we really, and people who I trust, because they're skeptical and they're not just, they don't just get seduced by some magic trick, saw real demonic voodoo powers. I personally have never seen it. I understand that it's possible. And they've seen things where you see the dark forces at work, the paganistic forces. The Torah refers to them in different places, those that had so-called pagan witch, the forces of witchcraft, sorcery, black magic, voodoo, demonic forces. So, and it's very simple. Negative spiritual energy can be misused. Misplaced spiritual energy becomes a demonic force. Think of fire. Fire warms things. Without fire, we would not be on this earth. We need the warmth of the sun. We need fire to warm food, to keep us warm from the cold, etc., etc. But that same fire, uncontrolled, becomes a fire that consumes and destroys. On the other hand, water is the same thing. Water we need for nourishment, for drink, for 90% of the human body is water. 2/3 of the earth is covered by water. Yet water can also be a force of flood, a force that destroys. It all is how it's used and how it's channeled. So each of us has, in a sense, a Moses within us, and we have a Balaam within us. And it's up to us to determine how we're going to use it, how we're going to channel it. And these negative forces are there everywhere. Does, for example, a red thread actually work? Other so-called kameas that sprechen up at ayin. You have old wives' tales, old bubbas who say, do this, take some garlic, put it in your left toe, and some sugar in your right tooth. I mean, I'm being a little humorous here. And this is a way of warding off the evil eye. You even see the custom that when new children are born, you surround them with certain holy passages. Some of them have an eye on it, the positive eye that watches over. Yes, all this is true. There are negative energies. And yes, there are kameas and other segulas, other so-called ways of protecting. But it doesn't begin and end there. That's a very superficial way of looking at life. That's like looking at life that we're complete victims. And without these little tricks to protect ourselves, we can't do anything about it. The most important thing of all, to protect yourself, is to be spiritually strong, to have self-esteem, confidence, know why you're here. The best defense is offense. Waking up in the morning excited. If you don't have that, if you're a demoralized human being, depressed, sad, don't know why you're here, aimless, you may find some kameya, some sgula, something, some red thread that will protect you for a little while. But how long can it protect you? You're vulnerable and you are prone to attack one way or another. So you'll put on another red string. That's not the approach. It's not the way to go. We have to build inner strength. You have a soul that is yours. You don't need anyone to sell it to you. You don't need any type of object to make it come alive. It's in your power. And if you can't find those tools yourself, find people that help and believe in you. And if they believe in you, help them build strength. When you're in that place, you want to add another so-called element that helps protect. Great. You know, a helmet. Soldiers in the army wear a helmet. As in sports, certain sports require certain protection. Now, let's say you only wore a helmet, but you had no skills how to fight a war, how to protect yourself. What will a helmet do for you? Yes, it'll protect you. You should have stray bullets, God forbid, or should something come your way, the helmet can be protection. But if you don't have the skills to fight a battle, a helmet is going to only be 1% of your protection. Your protection includes your strategies, your ways of avoiding the enemy, how to hide, how to attack, etc., etc. A helmet is an additional element, but it never replaces. The most important thing is having the skills, the tools to fight your wars. The same is true psychologically. It's ultimately, people like crutches, and you don't want a crutch to become your source of strength. That itself builds insecurity. Someone told me that they bought a red thread, then they bought another one from someone else, because everyone had their particular version, and said this is the one that goes back 1,000 years, this goes back to this Bob, but this Bob. Everyone had their red thread. And at the end of it, she tells me, with all my red threads, I've become even more insecure, because every morning I wake up and see, did I have this thread, do I have that thread, do I have that thread? It all is complement, if at all, if anything, to the essence of helping a person become self-sufficient, driven by self-esteem. The story of Bullock and Billam is a very powerful story in psychological lessons. It teaches us, 1, that there is negative spiritual energy. 2, it's only as powerful as what God wants. 3, it's only as powerful as what we want and what we allow. And 4, that we have the ability to control our destinies, that we have the ability to hang around in places where there's positive spiritual energy, reinforce ourselves, bolster our lives, and grow as human beings. And as we discussed last week, we also have the power to transform darkness into light, which ultimately is the lesson of the curses into blessings, transform negative energy into positive energy. So even when we have encountered in our lives some negative spiritual energy, for instance, you were in love with someone, and then you discovered that person was not a healthy person, are you to say that the whole thing was a negative experience? No. Once you got out of it, there's some positive. You gave love there. You may have even received love. You don't have to invalidate the entire relationship to move on. You have to extract those positive elements and turn the so-called serpent of death to the serpent of life. Learn from it. When is it a trap if you continue to stay there, or you continue to repeat those patterns, or continue to allow people into your life that have such type of poison? But the idea of extracting the sparks, throwing away the peel, as Rabbi Meir said, and taking the fruit is a fundamental lesson. So no matter where you are, whether you're a person who's never experienced a negative, and I hope that always remains that way, someone who has experienced it, we have an ability to move forward. So the understanding of the black magic, of the dark forces of life, is actually an understanding that helps us look at the world, understand that the world does have many different options, does have many negative things. I have met people that have very negative spiritual energy. You can feel it in the vibes. However, this doesn't mean it controls your life. So this chapter teaches us, number one, the pitfalls, the challenges. Number two, that within that, nothing can control you. It's divine will that ultimately controls the destiny. Third, that it's our will. The divine will can control Balaam from cursing, but cannot control us from choosing. And finally, that we have the power to transform. And remember, as I said earlier, that the Satan and the serpent, deep within, their purpose is a holy one. Their purpose is only there to help us become better people. Only there is a challenge that's meant for us to turn into opportunity. However, we have the choice. If we choose to be foolish, if we choose to ignore, if we choose to be taken by the moment, instant gratification, yes, we become a victim to these forces. But we also have the power to get out of that. So, in the sum of it all, there's much energy in this world, but the most important is to know positive energy is in our hands. We can initiate it, we can generate it, we can help with others. I've committed my life to bring positive energy to people. Can I be cynical and find a hole, find a cloud in a blue sky? Of course. Just look around. There's many reasons to be resigned, to be negative, to say the more things change, the more they stay the same. To say as much as hope and beauty we see in life, we see people behaving in atrocious ways. People you trust, people you thought were role models, and then you see them fall. Many reasons to be cynical. But there's only one reason to be upbeat, and that is the faith and the belief in the dignity of the human being. That's our choice. I have chosen to live that way, my life. It's not that I don't see the other side. I've chosen to see the other side, but know that this side, the holy side, is more powerful. And if we don't make that choice, we give strength to the other side. So I have like a certain type of mischievous side to me that I will not allow myself to succumb to the dark forces of life. I know people in my life, people who come to me, people who trust me, who speak to me, who keep telling me how dark things are. And I will not allow that darkness to be more powerful than light. You say this is being just obstinate, so be it. But as long as myself and some of us, and you out there, can hold on to something, there's hope. And the fact is, history shows that the Jewish people were people who carried the banner of light. Faced with darkness, they chose light. Faced with darkness, they believed in light. And that is what we have to do. We have to believe in it, in ourselves, in each other, and that itself exposes and allows that light to emerge. That is the story, and that is the story of life. And I hope that each of us, and I offer a humble blessing, that each of us has the strength to hold on. Even when things seem hopeless, turn to someone else who can help you hold your hand. They tell the story about one of the Rebbes who was in the Holocaust, and there was a particularly very wicked, cruel Nazi commander of a concentration camp, and he had this game he liked to play, game quote unquote. The game was that the Jews were asked to dig a trench, a wide trench, and then they were told to stand, not asked, they were commanded, ordered, barked, to stand on one side of the trench and jump over. Since it was pretty wide, it wasn't so easy to jump. Those that made it over would not be shot. Those that didn't would be shot immediately. Yet the Jews, what choice did they have? Many of them just decided to give up and just, shoot me already. But there was this Rebbe, he was one of the people in the line who dug the trench that morning. And he had a chassid of his, and the chassid said to the Rebbe, it's enough is enough. The Rebbe said, we have to fight on. We have to keep going. Every moment that we have a chance to stay alive, we never know how God is going to keep us alive. So when the guy started playing the game, shooting like at, the humiliation, there's no words to describe that atrocity. But he started playing the game, so many people were shot. This Rebbe jumped across. The chassid also jumped across. They ended up both being saved and coming out of the concentration camps, because a little while later was the liberation. But afterwards, the Rebbe says to the chassid, or rather, the chassid says to the Rebbe, they were speaking to each other, where did you have the strength? You're an older man, the strength to jump over this trench. So the Rebbe said, I held on to the kapata, to the overcoat, to the long coat of my parents and my grandparents and my great-grandparents. In other words, he visualized in his mind that he comes not alone, he comes with the strength of ancestors, of faith, of connection, with a promise that we will be redeemed one day. So he held on to that promise, and that gave him the strength to jump over, to fight for life, even though there were so many reasons not to do so. And the Rebbe then turned to the chassid and said to the chassid, and how did you jump over? He says, well, I held on to your overcoat. There are people in this world that are blessed with that type of strength, and they give us strength. May we all be that type of person. May we all help each other. And above all, may it not be under such circumstances, obviously. It should be in positive ways. Today we also have our mini holocausts, we have our own challenges, our own darkness, our own Balams. But know that if you hold on to the right coat, if you hold on to the right people, they will help you get through those darker times. And then there will be your obligation, the moments when you have to help others get through it. Everyone have a very good night. Next week I will be back live in New York at this Wednesday night class. And as always, it's been a pleasure to speak to you. Good night, be strong, bring light into this world.